All right, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. We have two major figures making pivots on net zero recently. So you have BlackRock CEO Larry Fink is now beginning to publicize actively, not just on some random panel, his shift to an interest in a balanced energy infrastructure based on what he's hearing from, and you will never believe this, but BlackRock's clients, rather than that like nebulous assumed stakeholder concept. And New York Governor Hochul is making a U-turn on net zero, admitting that climate policies her government has supported is bankrupting New Yorkers. Also, in other good news, a major free speech court case was just won, so we're going to talk about what that means. And for Unhinged, a popular, I don't know why he's popular, Chinese TikTok professor asks the brave question: if money is infinite, why do we still have poverty? We are going to talk about all of this on episode 531 of the In the Tank podcast. Okay, guys, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lueken, your host, and as always, we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, and Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow. Sadly, once again, Chris Talgo cannot join us today. He is in physical therapy, but as always, we also have Andy Singer in the background doing production work and keeping the show moving along. Hello, Andy. All right, so how is everyone doing?
I'm doing great. Up here in Northern Illinois, we have our typical Chicago spring, which means winter for 2 days, early summer for a day and a half, spring for 3 days straight, and then winter again. So looking forward to the real spring getting here. Some of the buds are coming on the shrubs. It's like, man, it's my favorite time of year.
Yeah, I'm
here.
I'm going to make you jealous for a second, Jim. I just got distracted for half a second looking out my office window at a lizard climbing on my fence. So that is how nice and warm it is here where I live. But you guys, before I get started, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate to the show there, because YouTube doesn't let us get monetized, so we can't do super chats and stuff, unfortunately. Please also click the thumbs up button to like this video, and remember that sharing it helps to break through some of that suppression that YouTube puts on us. Even just leaving a comment helps too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. All right, guys. So yeah, Jim, I'm bragging. And also, Sam, I'm bragging about how nice and warm it is here. It was like 84 the other day, and you guys are up north. So very sad.
Where I am, which is not bad at all.
Yeah, that's not too bad. Okay. I want to get to our unhinged topic quickly here, which I have titled Infinite Money, Print More Money to Solve Poverty, all that good stuff. This video came across my feed on X, and I was completely torn as to whether it is rage bait or genuine. But I did think of you, Sam, immediately upon watching it. So let's just play the video and let the audience see.
Make families have to endure impossible.
Here.
This one.
If the banks can print as much money as possible, why do we have poverty? Right? So that is the common answer, scarcity. We have poverty because of scarcity. But I already told you this. They can print money out of nothing. So money is infinite. So why do we have poor people then? Because we don't want people to all have money. The powerful people don't want that. And why? Because otherwise, no one would work. The point of putting money is to create the illusion that money is valuable, and therefore you work hard in order to obtain it. But in order for me to make you want to get money, I need to create artificial misery. You understand?
Anyway, so that's how the economy works. Sam, thoughts?
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
God bless Norm.
I'm not outraged because that is absolutely hysterically funny. It is unfortunate that there are probably a lot of people, and perhaps a majority in many age groups, that would follow that argument and say, yeah, that makes sense to me. Look, it's obvious that the fallacy he has created is the premise that that money is a thing. It's not. It's a yardstick. And if you have a yardstick of infinite length, then everything, the value of everything measured by it is going to be zero, not whatever you want it to be. So that's the problem in a nutshell. It's a very simple math problem. But the underlying thought there is that everything is unlimited, and that if you just decide to distribute it properly and morally, then everyone will have what they want. There are so many fallacies in that line of thinking that is absolutely insane. It is truly nuts. And I just found it so funny that the whole line of reasoning. But as I say, the important premise there is that no, there is such a thing as scarcity. There really is. If you want everything in the world, you can't have it, because if somebody else wants it, or even wants a part of it, then you can't have it, or you're going to fight over it, which is what really happens. And there are two ways of fighting over it. One is to fight over it by bidding, by saying, I'll give you this if you'll give me that. And money simply replaces or really lubricates what is ultimately a barter system. Everything's always a barter system. You're bartering your time, you're bartering your effort, your work, things of value. So everything's a barter system ultimately anyway. Money just lubricates it. So what you say, though, is that if you're going to have to work for something, which we all have to do, or we all have to provide some kind of recompense to one another, that's a good system. That's a moral system. That's a system in which human beings say, I value this, you value that, I would like to get some of that, and here's what I'm willing to give up of this. How much of that are you willing to give up? That's just like a barter system, only very well lubricated. The other way to do this is through force, is through basically a government, the state, whatever you want to call it, the mob, to decide what everybody gets. And that's what the college instructor there, I won't call him a professor, I don't know what the heck he is, but that's what that instructor is basically saying, is we need that. And he seems as if he would really like to go back to communist China and bring that here. I don't think that's a good idea at all. But those are your two choices. Your two choices are voluntary exchange or force.
That's the first time actually I watched that video, Cole. I didn't see it before. I found it really hilarious. And I was wondering, is this in the economics department, Linnea? Does this guy teach economics, or is this one of those studies departments, like moron studies department? It seems to be where it would be.
I have no idea I don't think he works for like a real university. He works for TikTok University. He works for the Chinese Communist Party, making propaganda to post on TikTok. That's what he does.
Well,
I think his like classroom thing, from what I have heard, is that he has like these private classes or something of like 5 or 6 people in the actual room, but a lot of his students are online students. I don't know. It's just he's popped up a couple times in my feed, and it's always, as Norm said there, commie gobbledygook. So it's just pretty much propaganda as far as I can tell.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering, why doesn't China just print infinite yen then? They'd be the
Yeah.
wealthiest country on earth. It's funny he didn't mention that. This actually, when he was during this little talk, I don't know what the hell that was. I was reminded of that story that maybe it's apocryphal. I think it's actually true. Where Milton Friedman was taking a tour of China, and he looked out his the car window with his new friends from China, and saw a bunch of men digging a new road with shovels. And he asked, well, why aren't you guys using bulldozers and backhoes and all this modern industrial equipment that we have everywhere in the world? And his Chinese minder said, well, this way we can keep people employed. They're happy to have these jobs. And Milton Friedman said, well, if that's your reasoning, why don't you just give them all spoons? Then you can employ even more people. That's the same mindset for the idea that you can just print money. And the only thing that people in poverty is the fact that we're not printing enough money. The economic illiteracy of that is mind-blowing, that person is standing in front of the classroom, and I presume he's probably considers himself an economics professor, or maybe has an economics degree. It's the printing of infinite money that makes us all poorer. There are so many examples of this in history. The Weimar Republic in Germany, of course, is one that most people think of. And that clip also made me think of that brilliant idea. It had to have been a joke, but it was only a few years ago, where it was the idea, hey, let's just mint a $5 trillion coin, and then we can get rid of the national debt like that. That's not how economics works. As Sam Karnick pointed out, the monetary system, maybe it shouldn't say that, but money is just a substitute for other things that you would trade that lubricates the process and makes the economy work more efficiently. We have known this as a civilization for literally thousands of years. And we don't need to get into, we need to move on, but you can get into the gold standard and how that has devalued money. And fiat money is, in certain ways kind of artificial, but the base economic lesson from that is that it does just lubricate the trading of labor or time or materials that you have in exchange for something else that you don't have and desire. The idea that you can just print money, infinite money, and that's what causes poverty. Scarcity causes poverty. In a very narrow sense, it does. But what causes modern poverty is inflation, the printing of infinite money, and corruption. Around the world, those are probably the top three things that cause poverty, because we do have the technology, we have efficient enough economies around the world that poverty is largely eradicated where those other three factors are eliminated.
Absolutely. Everyone here, and hopefully all of our viewers as well, know that if we did print infinite money, the dollar obviously wouldn't be worth very much of anything at all, and we would all be totally screwed, except for those of us who were savvy enough to diversify our savings, like by investing in real estate or, I don't know, precious metals. So a lot of people in conservative, libertarian, and even just plain old prepper spaces will hit you with ads for buying precious metals. They're not wrong that they're a good investment, but you want to be careful about who you buy your metals from. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys, and that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Bershatsky, owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. What does that mean? Well, it means everything that Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. So there's no sketchy sales pitch or bait and switch. He's held to the highest ethical standards, and there's full transparency, which, we all know is far too lacking in too many places nowadays. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty or some crazy Chinese guy convincing our government to just print a ton of money, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. Ira will make it very easy for you. So please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for IRA and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know who sent you. That helps us while you're helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals at Advisor Metals. And I want to give a thank you, a special extra thank you to Ira and Advisor Metals before we move on here for a second, because like I said at the top of the show, we can't get monetized on this channel because YouTube hates us and keeps giving us the runaround. So having sponsors and direct donations from viewers really helps us to keep it going. All right, so we are going to move on to our second topic here today: victory for free speech in Missouri versus Biden. So we here at the Heartland Institute have been very concerned with big tech and free speech, as I just said. So we're very pleased to report that a case has been fought for years has finally ended in our favor here. So the Federalist, whose news organization was actually among those conservative organizations specifically censored and targeted by the Biden administration, is now reporting settlement stops government from using social media as speech police. I'll read a bit from this article here. What is being billed as an unprecedented agreement will bar the 3 government agencies central to killing speech the Biden administration didn't like from pressuring social media platforms from doing so in the future. The settlement agreement and consent decree that ties up the remaining pieces of the landmark Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, years in the making, prohibits the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the U.S. Surgeon General from strong-arming social media companies into blocking or disappearing speech that the agencies deem as misinformation or disinformation, or the big brother doozy of the COVID era, malinformation. Federal officials will be prohibited from interfering with social media providers' decisions on content moderation. As investigations into the Twitter files and several congressional hearings exposed, the social media giants at times didn't need much arm twisting to do the speech suppression bidding of the Biden administration. So this case, that was then known as Murphy versus Missouri, went to the U.S. Supreme Court after Biden's Department of Justice appealed the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals' preliminary injunction against the government. But SCOTUS ended up kicking the case back to the district court. So it was in the lower courts that the NCLA attorneys, via discovery, uncovered a vast operation emanating from the highest levels of government. The NCLA revealed how agencies in the White House directed social media companies to censor viewpoints that conflicted with federal government messaging on topics ranging from COVID-19 to elections. The organization said, these egregious First Amendment violations silenced NCLA's clients and many other Americans. So I'm going to stop there. But Jim, Heartland was also impacted pretty heavily by that era of state social media censorship, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, this channel sure was. I mean, back in the day on this very show, which does not, it doesn't have an enormous audience. We have dedicated fans who really enjoy the show, and we appreciate every single one of them. But it's not as if we were some sort of big power that they needed to squash. But if you said the word COVID, you were automatically flagged, and we would see it after every stream. There would be in the background, in the back end, when you look in your YouTube page, a flag would be there. We almost had it used to make producer Andy very nervous. We were close to having our entire channel nuked from space because we talked about COVID in ways that the government did not approve. There were a lot of scandals in the Biden administration. This is one of the biggest scandals, not just of his administration, but really of the 21st century. The government cannot censor your speech, but they were using their power to lean on the social media companies, which includes Alphabet, Google, YouTube, to suppress speech that they disapproved of. It wasn't harmful. It wasn't remotely illegal. It just criticized and went against the messaging of the government. That is totalitarian. And the media, which should have been outraged about this, just basically went along with it. And in fact, encouraged it. Many, many big people in legacy media encouraged the stopping by the government of the spread of what they and the government agreed were dis, or malinformation. Instead, our media only gets the vapors when Trump calls them fake news. That is a threat to the Constitution and the First Amendment, because he makes fun of them as they should be made fun of. It did exist, and we talked about it on this program back when it happened, and that also got us in trouble. The Disinformation Board, and the person in charge was some sort of theater kid who was absolutely absurd, and she was going to be determining what should and can be said in the public square. These all this suppression of speech, just to back up just a little bit. I mean, this reminds me of the old sue and settle technique of the left, especially when it comes to climate policy. The environmental left will file a lawsuit against EPA. Everybody in EPA under a Democrat president are all their old buddies. In fact, most of them even worked in those nonprofits before they got to the EPA. And they say, oh my gosh, you're suing us to reduce carbon emissions. Okay, we'll settle the case. And so they get to enact draconian climate law through a rigged system in which a leftist organization finds a leftist judge to sue a federal department housed completely by leftists, and they get the policy they want without even having to have a debate on it in Congress, which is where laws are supposed to be written. This is a case where the first time in my memory, Sam, you've been watching this stuff a long time. Perhaps you can think of another example in which a similar kind of strategy worked for, the other side, the non-leftists, and actually in a way that protects our free speech. The thing that I'm worried about is that when the Democrats get back in power, and it will happen, when we have a Democrat president again, because the entire party now is so far to the left and that they are totalitarian, especially when it comes to free speech, because they do not want anybody speaking out against their policies, because their policies are garbage. They are not supported by the American people. And it takes just a little bit of pushback and a small microphone to completely collapse most of their arguments. So when they get back in power, they're going to do this again. Like most legal decisions, this is very welcome, but it is relatively narrow. They are going to there are plenty of lefty judges in the federal system for some judge shopping to go on, and for more settlements happening in a leftist restoration in an administration. So I'm very happy to hear this, but history tells me that it will not last long, and that the left, if they get power again, all of this stuff is coming back, all of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, tell them how you really feel, Jim. Sam, what do you? Do you have anything to comment on this? Because we're all so aware of it. Sometimes there might be things that our audience, might not quite wrap their heads around about how serious this is in the long term. That the government can kind of do the I'm not touching you thing, because they're actually just hiring a middleman to punch you in the head instead. It's a small victory, but it is a court decision that can be pointed at potentially to stop worse things from happening in the future. But what's really the scope of a victory like this?
Well, that's the important point, is that these decisions set precedents. And one of the things that has been in the constitutional interpretations by the court for decades has been that the government cannot hide its activities by pretending or by jawboning private sector entities and institutions into taking those actions. And that was exactly what was going on in this case. It's a well-known principle. What has happened, though, for decades upon decades, is that the court has simply ignored precedent when it made it, when it had a political goal. For example, if they wanted to decide that the state of Connecticut could not regulate the sales of contraceptives, they just say, well, there's a right to privacy. And they just threw away precedents and established a new precedent. They did the same with libel laws by destroying basically all libel laws. Ultimately, it did destroy all libel laws, really, in the Sullivan decision in 1963. And that's a Supreme Court decision where they simply threw away all the libel laws of the past and said, unless you can prove malevolent intent, then you can't get recompense for someone defaming you, which is if you're a public figure. But then the moment you get defamed, you become a public figure. So down the road, it didn't take long for that if to disappear. So it basically destroyed all libel laws, and that set the precedent. We need to restore Sullivan, by the way, and I believe it will be restored. You're seeing a trend here. That is what's happening is that those political ends that were being done by the Supreme Court and building on what the lower courts were doing, and the lower courts building on what the Supreme Court was doing, lasted for decades upon decades. We were in a very powerfully statist mindset in our country, and that was the outcome of it. That's changing now, and so we are finding that slowly the court, and in some cases fairly abruptly and importantly, is reversing some of those precedents. It can't happen fast enough, but the reality is that this sets a precedent, and each of these decisions that the Supreme Court has made in the last couple of years has been very, very important. And I think we're going to see a major change in the way this country is governed over the coming decades. It's going to come one of two ways. Either the Supreme Court is going to succeed in reining in the kind of politicization of the judiciary, or it's not. And either the federal government, the current government itself, the Trump administration specifically, is going to slow the expansion of rules, regulations, and government spending. Either those two things are going to happen, or the system will collapse. It won't work anymore. And this brings you back to the speech element of it, which is that what the Biden administration in particular was doing, it built on what the Trump administration had done, but what the Trump administration did was very temporary and very limited compared to what the Biden administration was doing in terms of restricting activities such as plane flights and mask wearing and things like that. The Biden administration was pushing that very hard, and the pushback was very strong. And what Jim mentioned is very important. It just takes one little voice for this to get undermined. So they can't even let one little voice, one little In the Tank podcast reach people. They have to get everybody. And that's what happens when you have complicated rules and overly complicated systems that centralize power. It gives them the ability to do this. But ultimately, they break the system, and the system will fall of its own accord, of its own, let's say, own momentum. The system doesn't have a mind. So of its own momentum, it will fall apart unless frankly, this Supreme Court and this government, the current government, save it. I'm not putting any bets on it making it past 2033, but we have to hope it will.
Sam, we're not supposed to say we're not supposed to say the CW word on this podcast.
Well, the thing that shocked me, I mean, the world really did change in 2020 with the pandemic. I mean, again, I remember on this show before you were the host, Linnea, it was me and Donnie and Justin Haskins, and I was convinced in early March of 2020, I said, the people, 2 weeks to stop the spread. Okay. We're only going to put up with it for so long. And then, things will go back to normal. People will not put up with that kind of lockdown where they live in communist China or North Korea. We're just not going to put up with it for very long as a people. How disappointed I was, and everybody should be, that was not the case. And so another big disappointment was the fact that we realized during the pandemic, and again with the attempt to control speech, as you said, Sam, or we've been saying, no matter how small that voice is, they cannot allow it. because there's just too much at risk. You know, if we allow it's if you allow a little green shoot of freedom and free speech, what do you know? It's going to grow into a giant plant in a tree somewhere. So they had to crack down on it literally everywhere. And it was a real eye opener and frankly kind of scary. I mean, I know that most government bureaucrats lean to the left. Most of our bureaucracy is filled with people that are basically party. You would think back in the day it would just be party patronage. You get a job at some agency in the federal government because you are a member of the right party. This was the revelation that our government is filled with radical people with tyrannical goals. And they had I guess I kept thinking this in my head. Is there no one in that office that says, guys, we can't do this? People have free speech in this country. They're allowed to speak their minds, especially when they disagree with us or government policy. That is the purpose of the First Amendment. And not a single bureaucrat, there were no leaked stories about this, not a single person from low level up to the very top said, hey guys, this isn't right. We shouldn't and cannot do this. It's probably illegal. We shouldn't try to legally justify it. We shouldn't do it at all because this is America and it would be immoral to gin up excuses, to silence the voices of people who disagree with us. Not a single person in government said that. That was the real scary thing about the entire pandemic era and the lockdown of free speech that was basically broad public policy under the Biden administration.
Yeah, well, and I'll make an argument too. Sorry for cutting you off, Sam. I do want to move us along here a little bit. If you really want to make this point, then I'll let you. But I want to say that I am going to bring us back to this concept, though, of the one small thing that can help to push a huge, massive, either government or corporate issue over an edge, because I think that that's what the Heartland Institute actually did achieve when it comes to BlackRock and their positions on ESG and Vanguard and all of those guys. I'm giving us credit for them moving it, and you'll see why in a little bit here. But I wanted to say too on the COVID issue that I think that era also really kind of woke conservatives and people on the right in general, people who vote Republican historically, up to the fact that you can't depend on the corporations going for our side of policy. You can't depend on them. They have immense power and influence themselves, and they're also Democrats. So that was kind of a wake-up call for a lot of people too, I think. Sam?
I just want to make a quick point that the philosophy of utilitarianism is the reason that no one in the government fights back against this when something like that happens, Jim. They all believe that what they're doing is for the greatest good of the greatest number. And that is a corrupt mentality. The reason it's a corrupt mentality is because your actions don't affect masses, they affect individuals. And if your actions harm one individual for the sake of others, that's immoral. That's a bad thing. There was a great story by Shirley Jackson about that, a horror story, and it shows the how you get totalitarianism from people who consider themselves very normal. And that's what was going on in our government. Their belief that this is for the best, and so if we have to lie, that's okay. If we have to suppress speech, that's okay too. It'll all work out for the best in the end. It seems to work out best for them, though, and not for anybody else.
Yeah. Weird. The Leviathan is self-sustaining. Awesome. All right. So we're gonna get to this bit about New York Governor Kathy Hochul here. I guess the final 2/3 of this program is really just Heartland Institute cheerleading, which hopefully you guys don't mind too much. But I'm very excited about all of these things, even though they're minor. I mean, these are small things taken individually, but all together, I really do think that it's kind of like an indicator of the direction that things are moving. So we're going to start with a video here from New York Governor Kathy Hochul. If we can pull that.
Families have to endure impossible choices. I will not stand by and let that happen. I believe that the goals of this law to build a clean energy future and strengthen our energy system for years to come is a noble one. I'm committed to it. But I also have to have responsibility to protect people from rising costs. If the path forward is only going to drive prices higher, then we have to act. And that's why I'm calling on the legislature to work with me in the next few weeks before the budget is due to come up with a common sense plan that understands the realities that we're dealing with today. This is not the world of 2019 as much as we wish it were when this law was first passed. We will not walk away from our climate goals, but make sure that the path we're on is realistic and fair to the people we serve. Because a climate policy that leaves working families behind is not a sustainable path forward.
All right, so now she's still paying lip service to all the climate stuff, and she will continue to, just as all of these organizations and all of these people who've been pushing this net zero claptrap for years are going to continue to pay lip service to it while they back off of it, because they can't do otherwise, because they know that they have a lot of crazies voting for them. So, all right, I want to pull up this Politico report, which is just some more demoralization from the left towards the left on these issues. So Hochul proposes weakening New York's climate law. The governor wants to delay regulatory deadlines and implement accounting changes that will make emissions reduction targets easier to meet. Oh, and as just an aside real quick before I forget, notice in the video how she slipped up and she said take responsibility for a second instead of like maintain or direct us towards a responsible future or whatever. Take responsibility for her policies and her party's policies crushing the working class in New York City, in New York State. All right, so back to the article though. Governor Kathy Hochul is backing measures that would weaken the strict deadlines for implementing New York's landmark climate law and make targets easier to meet. Hochul has formally proposed changing the way the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act calculates New York's emissions, effectively requiring less aggressive reductions, according to 3 people familiar with the proposal, and they all are anonymous in this article. The governor has also proposed delaying the timeline to establish regulations to achieve the goals, which is the subject of ongoing litigation, to 2030, while keeping the law's emission deadlines intact. The undeniable fact is we cannot meet the Climate Act's 2030 targets without imposing new and additional crushing costs on New York businesses and residents, Hochul wrote in an opinion piece. The governor's proposed changes, if she succeeds, would be the most significant weakening of an ambitious climate law in a liberal state since Democrats embraced aggressive efforts to combat global warming. Hochul's push exemplifies the increasing focus of many Democratic leaders across the country on affordability as they grapple with rising energy costs. And of course, Hochul blamed the pandemic, supply chain problems, inflation, and also, of course, President Donald Trump's opposition to offshore wind. The largest impact of that change is the removal of upstream emissions from the extraction and transportation of natural gas and other fuels imported into New York. So they were attempting to regulate based on stuff that happened not even within their own state's borders. So that's great. And I'm going to flash back really quickly, keeping all of this in mind, to something that Hochul said last year, reported in the Center Square. She said she's leading a group pledging to stick with the global climate pact following Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. She said, our states and territories continue to have broad authority under the U.S. Constitution to protect our progress and advance the climate solutions we need. So she said members of the bipartisan coalition, including Massachusetts and Rhode Island, Maine, and Vermont, are implementing a range of policies and programs to secure our net zero future, including statewide and regional carbon markets, 100% clean energy standards, and methane reduction programs for oil and gas, waste, and agricultural sectors, among many others. So this is interesting. She's not eliminating their targets, but they are pushing them back again. And what I'm hoping for from this personally is that this actually is another little blip of a signal, like other ones that we've reported on earlier this year, of a trend across the board from the left and from the like net zero crew, right? It's not a full retraction. It's not even really a retraction, but I really think that it was the momentum of climate action over the last decade and a half that was making us all like hurtle towards disaster here. And now that that momentum has been really quickly halted, you know, it took more than a decade for them to get up to that speed. And so if current trends from Democrat leadership like Hochul and whatnot continue, it could be a lot more difficult than we think for them to get things going again, even if a Democrat ends up back in the White House. Guys, anything?
Well, yeah, I just want to comment that clip was just great. It
Yeah.
was kind of delicious. I mean, if only someone could have told them that their green mandates would make energy costs skyrocket. It's just a shame nobody ever said it publicly except all of us all the time, especially on the Climate Realism Show every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. This is like me saying I'm still committed to losing weight as I stuff cheeseburgers in my mouth and I can barely get the words out because my mouth is full of cheeseburger. Or I'm going to quit drinking as I'm drinking a beer. It's absolutely insane. This is all completely predictable. And you might notice that Europe is doing the same thing, Linnea. I know you've been noticing that too. And this is what's going on here, because the purpose of net zero and these green mandates is not to save the planet. You know, I still kind of maintain that they are not so dumb that they can't understand that humans are not causing a climate crisis, but they cannot resist the opportunity to use it for control. So the purpose of all of these of net zero and green mandates is to control the populace. And the trouble is, of course, is that that's the economic ramifications of these policies is supposed to be pushed off into the future. In fact, a lot of jurisdictions they would advocate for tax rebates or payments of some sort to help people with their high energy costs. I think you see that in some countries in Europe. So the purpose was to have these the economic ramifications of these dumb policies to be pushed far enough into the future that the American populace, the New York populace, the global populace would get used to the controls that had to be put in place to control their lives. And then the economics would come later. Surprise! The economic effects that control these policies came first, as they always do. And now they find themselves in big trouble because, and then you see this contradictory stuff like this. I'll throw it to Sam here, but in a kind of related issue, I saw on X the other day that there's a proposal now in Pennsylvania, my old home state, to suspend the gas tax and I think also the income tax because times are tough out there. You know what? Just repeal them or get them down. I always thought California and Illinois had really high gas taxes, and we do. I didn't realize Pennsylvania had one of the highest gas taxes. I think it's 54 cents a gallon out there in Pennsylvania, and so they want to suspend it because the price at the pump is too high for people. How about you just cut it down to the lowest? Because it's supposed to fix the roads in Pennsylvania, and I drive a lot in Pennsylvania, and they're still pretty crummy roads in Pennsylvania. But you know, the great thing about our positions and our side is that the laws of economics are undefeated, and they come and hit you in the face all the time when we most expect it, and when they are dreaming and not actually paying attention, least expect it.
Absolutely. Sam?
Yes, what they did was really funny, and we told people at the time this was going to happen, that they set the dates sufficiently far out that the people who voted for them and implemented them would no longer be in office when
Yeah,
the
that's a good
results
point.
hit. You know who was governor in 2019? It wasn't Hochul. It was Andrew Cuomo. He's the one who signed that. He, of course, is the one who, can I say, was responsible for the deaths of hundreds, possibly thousands of people. You know, sort of the Adolf Eichmann of New York State. I don't know. That's the kind of thing that we need to discuss at times, and we did then, and we will continue to do so. That's a winner issue. What happens is that they get the credit for being very caring people and for using utilitarian means to make the greatest good for the greatest number by socking it to other people who they don't vote for them and whom they don't like. So what happened was very simple, is that Cuomo and the legislature pushed this through, and they left it as a big steaming pile of bad stuff on the governor's desk. And a couple of years later, she said, "Oh my gosh, we can't do this. This isn't going to work." Well, we always knew it wasn't going to work, and we told you it wasn't going to work. But I don't know why you didn't listen. I do know why. You just don't care. But there's a terrific line in the article from the Center Square that you showed from last January. Hochul said that the climate pact is helping the United States reduce its carbon output. And she cited data showing that between 2005 and 2022, member states, this is the states that were in this compact, reduced net greenhouse gas emissions by 19%, while increasing collective gross domestic product by 30%. So their economies grew in nominal terms, number terms, by 30%. So I went and looked and checked on the St. Louis Fed to see how much the United States economy overall grew in that same time period. It doubled. It doubled. So if they had not done this and they had grown at the same rate as the rest of the U.S. economy, our economy would be something like several trillion dollars. Our GDP would be several trillion dollars bigger each year, and would have been over that entire time. You talk about worries about the federal deficit and about, what's going to happen with Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all that. We would have had a spree. We could have spent money on forever wars anytime we wanted. We could have done whatever we wanted, or actually let the taxpayers have it back and do what they want with it, or pay down debt. Pay down our debt. Pay it down, and let people spend the rest on themselves. Instead, what we got was Andrew Cuomo, temporary hero, capital T, capital H. We got Andrew Cuomo as temporary hero, and Kathy Hochul as the schmuck who gets messed over in the end, sort of the fall gal, the fall gov over there.
That is always kind of the funny thing about a lot of these climate policies, especially at the state level. At the federal level, they can just keep piling it on kind of and keep shuffling it around. But at the state level, if you have, here's a governor who says, I think it would be really great if I said no to every new infrastructure project that has anything to do with any nuclear facilities or pipelines for gas or whatever. And that'll give me a nice boost with all of my greenie friends, and it'll be terrific. And then, 15 years down the line, some poor schmuck gets to look around and see how decimated their industries are and everything, and they get blamed for it when the energy prices finally come home to roost. Sucks to suck, but it's your party, so I don't feel all that bad. So this is along similar lines, and I hope that you guys see the thread here. And the thread is not just net zero, but it is in issues coming home to roost is our final topic today, and that is on BlackRock blinking or flinching on their energy policies. So Daily Caller reports BlackRock CEO abandons climate delusions for investor needs. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has publicly shifted towards what he calls energy pragmatism. Boy, that kind of sounds familiar. It almost sounds a little bit like energy realism, a bit, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just spitballing here. Admitting that society now demands a balanced approach, to meeting power needs rather than adherence to rigid climate agendas. Guys, BlackRock is the world's top financial manager, overseeing more than $10 trillion in assets that sway markets, companies, and even governments. It delivers risk analysis tools that guide how firms allocate capital. That's an important one, you guys. Set strategies and tackle issues from energy supply to corporate governance. Another big one. Fink points to China, hilariously, which leads in new nuclear plants, vast solar installations, while importing record volumes of gas and oil and coal to meet surging demand. Fink says society has moved into a better position of having more pragmatism. And what you're hearing from me is I'm echoing what we're hearing from our clients. Fink's tone matches his earlier report of $4 billion lost in ESG-linked assets in 2023. So, pausing there for a second, he's saying we're having more pragmatism, and then you read that they lost $4 billion on ESG investments, a hit from states like Florida and others pulling funds over concerns about politicized investing. BlackRock dropped the weaponized ESG label by mid-2023 and exited the Net Zero Asset Managers Group in January 2025 amid antitrust probes and backlash from state governments. Fiduciary duty, maximizing investor returns, had taken a back seat as the firm lobbied corporations on woke interests ranging from board diversity to cuts in industrial emissions. Now, with lawsuits mounting and states divesting billions, Fink invokes that same duty to justify pragmatism. So, what do you know? That's weird, isn't it? Now, I wonder what if there might be some organizations out there that might have been perhaps working pretty hard with state legislators to ban ESG portfolios from public investment. And so for that reason, I think in part that we can toot our own horn on this one, you guys. Heartland, if to our viewers who might not know, or to people who might be new to the show or new to Heartland, who might have got here from some random other video that got pushed to you by some miracle of the algorithm. Yeah. Heartland was at the, let's say vanguard of raising the alarm about ESG and getting state lawmakers aware of it. So if you go to our website, there's two websites that are affiliated with us. There's heartland.org, and you type in ESG. You'll find dozens of research and commentary papers written by Tim Benson and Jack McFerrin, warning states about the threat posed by ESG scores and promoting legislation that prevents it from taking hold. And if you go to, I think we can call like a sister organization, Heartland Impact, you'll see that there has been a ton of legwork done in testifying in support of bills that made it harder for ESG to sneak into state employee retirement portfolios. So I want to give shout out to Cameron Schulte, Samantha Fillmore. These people have been working their tails off for years to get a variety, like a pretty wide variety of states to ban this stuff from public investment. And so they should be taking victory laps every time news breaks like this into the mainstream, because this is the kind of work that Heartland and Heartland Impact to do that often really doesn't make the news, but I think it's actually having upstream impact on companies like BlackRock, or downstream rather, impact on companies like BlackRock and Fink, who I've said in the past that I really don't think that Fink is like some ideologue. I think that he gets like his little reports from his aides and stuff, and they tell him, hey, we're in a bad place here. This would be cool, or that would be cool. And then all of a sudden he gets slapped with lawsuits, is getting pushed out of entire state funding portfolios. And that kind of thing will make you sit up in your seat a little bit, I think, even if you were basking in the praise of all the net zero loons out there for a while. So guys, these companies depend on the public not knowing what they're doing. And Heartland and other organizations have made it so that legislators' ears perk up when they hear the word ESG or sustainability or whatever. And that has a huge impact down the line.
Yeah, I just want to just to grab the trumpet and keep tooting the horn here. You have to also call out by name Justin Haskins, who's the VP for Policy at the Heartland Institute, Donald Kendall, who heads up our Emerging Issues Center, and Jack McFerrin, who also works in the Emerging Issues Center. They did the hard work of educating the public, but especially policymakers here in the United States about the dangers of ESG and what the real agenda of that really was. And it was from the states. States started pushing back on ESG. I believe Florida was definitely one on the vanguard of that, saying that you have a fiduciary duty, and that's where these things started to percolate. And now ESG is pretty much dead. It could be revived, but it's pretty much dead now, which seemed impossible as few as 2 years ago. That if you have a public pension, you have a fiduciary duty to the people who are depending on that public pension for their retirement, and you can't put a climate control global political agenda ahead of that fiduciary duty. States started to do this, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. But a lot of the education, I know that the Heartland Institute, we have a lot of friends and allies in the think tank world. I think it's very fair to say that the Heartland Institute was one of the first and most prominent think tanks out there educating people on what ESG is. You can put ESG in the search bar of our YouTube channel, and you will see many, many, many shows that we dedicated to that subject. You can search ESG at heartland.org in the search bar, and you will see, as Linnea mentioned, tons and tons of research and commentaries and all the work that we have done for that. And so this is something to celebrate. But ESG, it was Larry Fink. What ESG really was, and kind of is, and could be again, is fascism, really, in the direct definition of the word. Basically, a corporate tyranny combined with government to politicize investing and thus advance the leftist, especially climate agenda. The power of, as you said, $10 trillion in assets BlackRock controls, one entity, basically at the behest of whatever Larry Fink feels like doing. And I know that he's backed off of these things. He said, I think at least a year ago at no less than a World Economic Forum event, that the green energy revolution is not mature. That doesn't create enough power for the energy we need, but especially for AI, for the data centers that we need. And so AI was either AI or saving the climate. And Larry Fink chose AI because ultimately he does want to make money. They thought they were going to make money through ESG by completely rigging the system and keeping control-hungry governments happy by doing their bidding while still making money on the side. It turns out that is not how it turned out, and couldn't turn out that way. And reality, just like economics is hitting New York State in the face, economics also hit the ESG agenda in the face. That's just really, really what happened there. And so this is great news. As the thumbnail says, BlackRock flinches on energy because he wants more nuclear now and the net zero agenda. Actually, maybe Sam can speak to this, and both of you can speak to this. I thought, as far as Fink would go, he would just say, let's just add some nuke to the other mandates that we have here. No, he also said net zero is stupid. It's in shorter terms. It's not going to work. It's not necessary. Let's just go nuclear and as much as possible, fire up those data centers, and let's go into the future together. That's a lot more pleasant. But I didn't expect him to basically give up raspberry to net zero, so I'll take it.
Sam, it's all yours if you want to respond to Jim.
Yes, I'll take it. I think what Larry Fink was doing here was announcing a new direction for the nation's elites and even for international elites, which is that you now have permission to be pro-energy to a certain degree. I think that it is very much to the credit of some organizations such as our own that kept on this issue and kept pressing it. And as Jim indicated, we had a team here, which I'm now a part of, in fact, which really pushed on that and really looked ahead at what was happening and found that there would be very bad consequences from it, which is, of course, exactly what happened. Now, those very bad consequences landed in great part on Larry Fink's company. And so he's decided that this is not a good idea anymore, and we need to back off and think a little bit before we make energy decisions. Okay, great. The thing is that I find what's another very interesting point here is that it's emblematic of the concentration of power in this country, and in fact, in the developed nations around the world, which are the ones that count, of course. The concentration of power, there isn't a lot of competition at the highest level of the finance industry. You have BlackRock, you have a couple of others, Goldman Sachs, not many, and so Main Street is another one, I think it's called. So there aren't that many competitors for this, and really they can only take on so much debt and so much liquidity. They can only use up so much liquidity at any time, and they can only take up so much risk at any time. So having three is probably about the most concentrated you can get, or three major ones, let's say. So what you have here is a system where power is very centralized, and somebody like Larry Fink and his team, as Jim pointed out, and you too, Linnea, and his team can decide, well, this is what the world is going to look like for the next 10, 20 years, whatever we decide. And then they say, okay, well, it's no longer going to look like that. We're going to make it look like something else. But the concentration of power hasn't gone away. And that is a danger and that we still live under. And we at Heartland have been pushing that knowledge out to the world. And I hope people will appreciate this current victory and support the work that we're doing in getting these insights out to the world, because they're very unusual. The reason they're unusual is because big corporations like that give a lot of money to organizations that talk about the effects of the policies that the government that the big corporations are supporting is doing. And so Heartland has, because we're smaller, frankly, yes, we're a little more independent, maybe a lot more independent. And I think we have not been beholden to the corporate sponsors in the way that, frankly, most other think tanks are. And that is a strength for us. But it means that we need support from individuals, from just the regular Main Street people. And that, as we get that support, good results come. We've shown that. And I think that that's something that we all have to recognize, that the concentration of power in this country has gotten too extreme. It's not constitutionally valid. It's not, the government shouldn't be encouraging this, as it does through a myriad of laws. And it's not the markets pushing this. It's the way the governments and the elites work together and cooperate so that bigger companies get bigger and smaller companies get squeezed out. That's not a good thing. That's not what America's supposed to be. That's not the American way. And the Heartland Institute, for our entire history, has stood for the American way, which is the only way to establish the American dream for people. And so I think that that's the next step is always going to be to clarify how this concentration of power has occurred, what sustains it, and what the effects are. And we will continue on that work, and I hope that people will recognize that and support us for that, because this is going to get more and more difficult as more institutions and entities are affected by the actions that we take.
Absolutely. And it's a complicated position, right? Because basically the same thing that we were talking about with the free speech issue is, these are ostensibly private organizations, private companies. If you look at it to no depth at all, with just surface level looking at it, you're like, look, this is the free market. if BlackRock is going to have these, these ESG focused funds, then what's your right to do anything about it or to try to stop states from investing in it and stuff? And it's like, well, it's because what's happened is we've allowed these big companies to become almost like governments themselves, that the government or that world governments like work with them in order to enforce things that the government can't legally do to its citizens on their own. And so they recruit the help of these motivated companies with all sorts of little goodies and stuff to get them to enforce it instead. And it's very sneaky. Like I said before, it's the "I'm not touching you" thing, while somebody else walks up behind you that they paid and clocks you in the back of the head. It puts us into a difficult position because sometimes you get attacked from from the right on this stuff too. You'll get some well-meaning but not understanding the full picture, like libertarian organizations, they'll get mad at you for being mean to BlackRock or whatever. and it's just a disaster all around. So it's important that people understand what this is, this behemoth of ESG that has been more or less destroyed in that configuration with that name. But I guarantee you that they're working on bringing it back under a different name. We just have to keep our eyes peeled for what that is.
Absolutely. And one quick point, the grant of limited liability that governments give to corporations is an extremely valuable grant. And it tends to create bigness, because if you're not going to be held liable beyond your investment in an organization, if you're not going to be held, and that's how that works. If you're not going to be held liable, then you can take more risks. So corporations can take more risks than private organizations, privately owned companies. That is a big gift to them. And I actually don't have any problem with corporates being taxed high if that's the decision of the people, provided that the government is not impeding the growth and the growth in the number and size of smaller companies. What happens is they suppress smaller companies first, and then they don't limit the growth of larger companies, which is ultimately become close to unlimited, as you can see, because of limited liability, which gives them this incredible insulation against risk.
Yeah, I do want to drill in. I mean, that's kind of tangential to our point here, but I think you've brought up that point before, Sam, that probably it's time to rethink how these different companies are classified at the federal tax level and also at the like the legal level too.
Yes, liability.
Could you put, I know it's kind of asking a lot of you off the cuff, but can you put this can you explain it for our audience in like layman's terms or as simply as possible so that maybe they get what the problem is or what problem we've run up into
Sure.
with these companies?
Sure. Let's say you have two companies, all right? One is a privately owned company. If somebody sues that company and they win, and the court and jury find that the harm that they did, okay, to that person is $10 million, okay? And the company only has $4 million of assets, but the individual has, let's say, $8 million of assets. Well, then the decision can be that individual makes up the difference. So the 10 million is paid out, 4 million from the company's assets and 6 million from the assets of the individual. So to make it easier and more convenient for people to invest, governments in the 19th century, around close to 200 years ago now, started to establish limited liability, where they would say that you're only, if in that same situation, the person who was awarded $10 million in damages only gets the 4 million from the company's assets. They can't dip into the assets of the investors. Now think how there's two things that are important here. That's really a great thing for an investor, that they don't have to pay out if their company does something wrong. But what does that do? You talk about the recklessness of corporations. People are always complaining about that. It's baked into the system itself, because people will become more attuned to risk, or people will take more risks when you take risk away from them and basically put it on. You're not even socializing the risk. You're putting it on the victim. You're saying that $6 million that you were supposed to get, you're not going to get. And that's just too bad, because that's the way the system works. Well, that's not the way the system has to work. You could change it, but we have not done that. And so what happens is that you make things more more convenient for corporations and for their investors, and you give them an encouragement to take riskier behaviors. So what you're doing is you're creating what's called a moral hazard. So that's number one. The other thing is that you're making it, because you're lowering the risk of investment in these corporations, you're raising the amount that they can get from investors, because it's less risky than investing in the smaller company that doesn't have this limited liability protection. So what do you get? You get bigger and bigger and bigger corporations. And that's what we have. And then we have so many other things like regulation and tax treatment that also encourage the growth of companies and, frankly, the way the government works in tandem. So you get this incredible concentration of power, centralization of money. It's not natural. It is not a market phenomenon, and it is definitely not a market failure. It is a government grant that has become a hammock, frankly, for risky behavior, for people indulging in risky behavior. And so we really do need to consider what we are giving to companies by allowing limited liability, and what the public should expect in return for this gift that they are giving those companies. That's, I hate to call that the short version, but it is.
No, I think that was really helpful. Yeah, because I think that a lot of people get confused when they see, well, an organization like ours talking, again, bad against a lot of these big companies, and also just the confusion that they have in terms of a kind of cognitive dissonance between being like, well, I want free markets, but like, man, I feel abused by these companies at this point. What do we do about it while not sacrificing, good market principles?
I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and somebody introduced me to somebody else as, this is Sam Karnick. He's for taxing corporations at 100%. I said, well, I don't have a philosophical complaint.
All right. So we have some good questions and stuff from the audience too, which I think we have a little bit of time to get to today, which we don't normally do for In the Tank, but I think it's worth it today. So we have a question from Above Us Only Sky, who watches this show and also the Climate Realism show. So great to see you here. He asks, what happens when the debt bubble does burst?
I would assume that this means the federal debt bubble. I think there are certainly debt bubbles in the private sector, but they're not nearly as big. What happens when the debt bubble bursts is that you will have a devaluation of the dollar. There's no other way of dealing with it. What that means is it's either going to happen through the federal government saying what was worth it, what you had to pay $1 for now. Well, you have to pay $1 for now, you'll have to pay $1.50 for. That's devaluing the dollar. And so what that does is it devalues your debt. It reduces your debt. So when you have, let's say, an annual budget deficit of $4 trillion, let's say, which it could get to very soon, you have a budget deficit of $4 trillion, then you cut that in half maybe. And so it's only $2 trillion in terms of real value. So what you're doing is you're ripping people off. So you can do it that way, or you can do it just through a monetary inflation, which has been the go-to for other governments. And somebody in the comments mentioned Argentina a little while back, and that's exactly what was going on there. And then they under Milei, they tightened the government, tightened up government spending, tightened up government spending, and suddenly things are much better, and inflation has gone away. I always argue in my op-eds and in the newsletter Life, Liberty, Property that, and in a coming paper coming from the Heartland Institute in the beginning of April, about that inflation is caused by excessive government spending. And there's a little bit that goes on the end there, which the central bank monetizes, but you don't need that part. Excessive government spending is the cause of inflation, and that's what will happen, is that this excessive government spending will come to roost in a devaluation, either through inflation or the government directly repudiating some of its debt by devaluing the dollar. I think it would be through inflation that they would do it, but it's possible. It's entirely possible that the federal government would be something very like a shutdown. It would be a informal, not unannounced shutdown, but oh boy, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, they can't afford it. Can't afford it. So I'm sorry, but those will be cut.
Look, we went over this in the very beginning of this podcast.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any debt bubble bursting. What are you talking about? All
we just have to print more money.
That's called modern monetary theory, and that is exactly what the Biden administration ran on, and in their processes of deciding what to spend. I think their decisions what to spend were based on how much can we get in fake money and redistribute. But the bottom line is that modern monetary theory basically says, yeah, you're right. You can spend whatever you want because you can just print money. But no, what happens is reality intervenes, just as it has with Governor Hochul. And yeah, it's always the next administration that gets tagged with it, like Hochul got tagged with what Cuomo did. And so the Trump administration is in fact suffering from what the Biden administration did. And
right.
We have to fight our way through that and understand what really happened and what the causes of these problems are. It can be complicated, as Linnea always points out to me. You know, can you put this in layman's language? It's let me try, but it might be tough.
Yeah. Oh, have mercy on us, and we're not all that great. So one person says cut fraud. Yeah, that should just be standard, but a lot of this stuff, I'm not saying don't do it. We should be hyper aggressively pursuing all the fraud to cut it out, if only to show how much of it there is, because this stuff is on the count of hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars total. But our government loses billions of dollars between the seat cushions at this point.
Yeah. Yes.
Well,
that's a major problem.
There are people whom I respect who suggest that the entire budget deficit would be gone if we just got rid of fraud. I think Elon Musk has said that as well.
Yeah. Elon Musk has said that. Donald Trump said it just the other day. I mean, it wouldn't eliminate the entire national debt in
right.
a year. But yeah, the annual budget deficits. I mean, we have Doge is still quietly doing work, by the way. They haven't completely gone away, but it's not getting the publicity it used to get. But just some of we've barely even started to scratch the surface of the amount of fraud and grift that's going on. And it really needs, again, if we had a fair and legitimate operating legacy media, this would be the main story everywhere all the time, because this money is being literally stolen. I keep seeing, again, independent journalists are going out there knocking on doors, realizing that millions of dollars in just one town, in one shopping center, is being funneled into these fake businesses, and then that money ends up finding its way into the coffers of Democrat politicians and Republicans alike, I'm sure. The more this goes on, the more you realize how much no one has ever even attempted to stop this. We have operated as a government and as a people as if this isn't happening. People out there are filling their pockets with our money, and they've been getting away with it for a very, very long time. I am 100% confident that if we were to reduce the actual fraud going on and put a stop to it, just turn off that spigot, the budget deficit would completely disappear in 1 year. There's just no way that's. It's impossible for me to believe that it's not happening. I know I maybe did double negative there, but just from what we've been able to discover in just a few programs in a few states, frankly, only in a couple of cities, the level of absolute criminal theft is enormous. And if we got a hold of that, a lot of these other conversations we're having become academic.
You're right. And this theft has been paid for by debt, not by taxing the current taxpayers. So it's really even much worse, frankly, because if you were taking it directly from current taxpayers, they might scream about it. But when you take it in the form of debt, all you're doing is corrupting your system, and in particular the financial system, the money. So that's a very terrible thing. And I think that what we're hearing out of California, just little snippets, if we get any kind of even small amount of truth coming out of California, the number's going to be insane. It's going to be that we wouldn't have to tax anybody anything to pay for what's legitimate.
Exactly. And what I can't remember if it was, because now I'm going off the top of my head, whether it's hospice communities or some other kind of medical facilities, that there are more of them in Los Angeles County than the entire state of Florida. And I think it's hospice centers. Florida is like, as the saying goes, Florida is God's waiting room. People are there dying all the time. God bless you in Florida, but it's got a very elderly population. Just that fact alone, the idea that Los Angeles County has more of those than the whole state of Florida, and by a good number, is, evidence right in your face of how much fraud is going on. And people, I started getting mad about this stuff because people need to go to jail. Nobody's going to jail. Nobody's getting deported. Nothing is happening. This is extremely frustrating. And frankly, all these fraudsters know the chance of them individually getting caught is probably pretty low. If they can last out until at least 2026, maybe 2028, if the Democrat gets back in the White House, they're home free, man. So this is extremely discouraging. I'm very black-pilled on this fraud stuff, I got to say.
They've repatriated a lot of that money to their home countries and can always go back and be rich there.
It's gone. You guys,
they're going to escape. They're going to escape. Escape the punishment no matter what.
Suitcases of cash were flowing out of the Minneapolis airport. Have you seen that report on ABC News or NBC or on The View? No, you have to find that information yourself from alternative media. Who's arrested for that? That money isn't just, money doesn't walk on its own. People have to put it in a freaking suitcase and then send it out of the country.
The person who should be arrested would be people like Tim Walz and the other people who fostered this. Unfortunately, that's not likely to happen, but I'd be all for it. I think it would be a good result.
Yeah. Can you imagine the crying and the screaming though about optics on that? But I agree. I saw a great post the other day by someone called Mark Andreessen, who said, who reposted something from a person called Robin, who said, "Why does it cost less to build a base on the moon than high-speed rail from San Francisco to Los Angeles?" And the Mark guy said, "Everything costs less than the cost of high-speed rail from San Francisco to LA because it's infinite." So very true. Guys, I didn't get to mention this on the show. There's been a lot of space news this week, and if you know me, you know I love space news, and I love anything that sounds even a little bit concrete in terms of plans for space exploration, putting boots on the moon, putting boots on Mars. Very excited. And so, guys, just think about this. If we can save on that deficit, think of how much money, all that fraud money, it could be going towards building my beloved moon base. So keep that in mind when you're supporting politicians. Get me my moon base. That is it for today, you guys. Thank you so much to everybody who watches. We love hosting this show for you guys, but that is all the time that we have today, unfortunately. Thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, all around. Jim, what do you have for the audience today?
We have the Climate Realism Show tomorrow, same bat channel, same bat time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we're very happy to bring the great Chris Martz from CFAC on with us tomorrow.
Yeah, that'll be a great time. Sam?
Yes, go to heartland.org and go to stkarnick.substack.com. As you can see there on the screen, you will lear a lot.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a nice review. Thank you so much to everybody and to our viewers. We will see you again next week.